All right, so you have heard that saying before, if walls could talk, right? Well, in this case, the statement is, if the park could talk, and it does. Local journalist and children's book author Tonya Duncan Ellis has written a new book that shares the history of Emancipation Park. The stories are actually narrated through the park's point of view. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, first what we got to do, we were talking about doing DNA and history earlier. Where are your people from? Because you got a Duncan in your name.
I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
So do you have any people there?
They were in Mississippi. They may have gone through Kentucky.
I
okay,
know.
we need to do some research. We might be cousins. All right. Tonya, you loved reading since you were a kid.
Yes, I loved going to the library. I always had a book in my hand, and my mom would take me to the library once a week.
Yeah.
So that was just something I always enjoyed.
When you grew up reading books, did you find a reflection of you in those books?
No, I didn't. Most of the books, I loved realistic fiction with little girls going through different adventures, but there were very few that reflected me.
Yeah, so you decided you would write your own book series.
Yes, I wrote a series called the Sophie Washington book series about an 11-year-old girl from Houston and her adventures. And it also has other diverse kids that are her friends in the stories. They're set in Houston, so they show the diversity of our community.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing is the diversity of history. As we know, there are just so many things around us every day that we drive by that we have no idea what the history is. The history of Emancipation Park, we had folks on from the Conservancy yesterday, is so amazing. For people who are not familiar with it, just share a little bit of the history of Emancipation Park.
Well, Emancipation Park was started by Jack Yates and some community leaders who raised around $1,000 to create a celebration spot for Juneteenth.
Yeah, and the thing is, they were freed slaves. Just a few years before, you weren't even allowed to buy land.
Right, right. So they created this spot to celebrate their newfound freedom, and it's continued on through the years.
Yeah.
And in my book, I talk about, in the park's voice, the history, different civil rights events that occurred near and around the park, and just take you through a journey of the park's history.
This is so cool. I love the idea of, because if you tell it from one person's voice only experienced so much, right? But from telling it from the point of view of the park itself, it experienced everything from day one.
Right.
So how'd you get this idea?
Well, initially when I wrote the story, I wrote it from the viewpoint of a child because I had read some articles talking about a woman's experiences in the park. And then I took it to my literary agent, and they actually rejected it in that form. And then I started reading other picture books to get different perspectives, and then I decided to have it speaking in the park's voice.
Yeah, they built me for freedom, so which means you had to certainly do your research, right?
Right, I did a lot of research. I actually, on a whim, went to the park during the pandemic, and I got chills imagining my ancestors walking on this land when I went to the park. And then I went home and did other research about things going on at the park throughout history and wrote the first draft of the book.
Yeah, and then you have these great narrations. You know, so many people, they think they have a book in them, and we all probably do have a book, if not a few books in us.
Yes.
But it's probably one of the #1 questions I get from people is, how do I write a book, and how do I get a book published? How do I go through this process? And as you mentioned, be ready for rejection, because you had that rejection, but you held true to what it was you were trying to do.
And it's a lengthy process, I'll tell you. I recommend that any aspiring author read widely in the genre that they want to write in so that they get a feel for the type of story that they want to tell, how it's structured. And I do a lot of journaling. I've done that since I was a little girl to keep me writing. So, I mean, there's a lot. I self-published my first books that I had out.
Which is something we can do today.
Right, before I wrote They Built Me for Freedom. And then to get a literary agent, you need to query. You send letters to agents and get them to accept your work.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different steps involved.
Yeah, and then of course, like I said, somebody to illustrate it.
Right, and then with my publisher is HarperCollins. So I wrote the words, they purchased the book from me, and then they had an illustrator that they selected. So I wasn't involved in that part of the process.
And that's the other thing that you have to do, is be ready to let go of some things, right?
Right, but it was great. It was a wonderful experience for me because my editor shared some of the samples, the sketches initially, so they did get some feedback from me, and we were very in sync when we were going through the process. So it was a
great
joy.
pairing.
Yeah, it was. I loved working with him, so it was wonderful.
And what's so wonderful about this is that you're able to teach a story. And to me, you know, sometimes you can learn things in school, and we need to do a better job, I think, of teaching a wide variety of people who took part in our history, like truly took part in history. But when you do it in a book like this, a child can take their time with it, they can sink into it, and they can imagine themselves there.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to encourage children to learn about history in our own backyards and to explore the world around us. So I hope through my work that I can inspire kids to look around and see the true history in our world.
Yeah, you have 13 best-selling books. Congratulations. The Sophie Washington series is one of them as well.
Right, and it stars an African-American girl who is based here in Houston and her friends. She's 11 years old, and she has different tween problems like making friends, standing up to bullies, managing, playing with video games, getting along with a little brother. So,
and there's an interesting point here. There are instances where, like, this obviously celebrates African-American history, but there are instances where it's not because the young girl's African-American, she just happens to be African-American, experiencing the same things that anybody else would experience. So just having a wider reflection of us as a community.
Right, I wanted to have a fun, relatable series, and actually kids send me pictures of them dressing as Sophie, and parents thank me for the series because it's where kids can truly see themselves.
Yeah. Up next, Halloween costume, Sophie Washington.
Exactly,
All
yeah.
right. Thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, the new baby shower gift right here. You can buy this book everywhere books are available. They Built Me for Freedom is